Afternoon, folks. Trying to finish up this Jeep bumper today. A lot of welding and grinding to do. Not going to show too much of that because it's more of the same and it's kind of a lot to film. But what the video is really going to focus on is welding these lugs into the slots on the bumper. We'll do a bit of that and we'll look it over, see how the welds turned out, and I'll discuss some questionable fit-up issues that I had. I'm not really sure if it's exactly how it's supposed to go. Again, the kit didn't come with any instructions, so I'll mention a few of those and might help you out along the way. And then we're going to fit it up on the vehicle and see how that whole process goes. Not going to worry about painting it for the purpose of the video because you're going to decide to do whatever you want as far as that. But we'll get to work now and see how it goes. So here it is with most of the welding and grinding done. I did this with a hard rock. I plan on going back later with a flap disc and kind of smoothing this out a little bit, but I really wanted to get an idea of how the welds turned out because I did stick weld a lot of this. And I kind of anticipated that I would have to go back and touch up some areas with the MIG gun, but a lot of this turned out pretty well actually. It helps being thicker metal, where even if you have a little undercut or something, you could blend that edge off and still have plenty of thickness. So that definitely helped out. A few areas that I'm not really sure, I don't really like how they turned out. This right here on the bottom, that's not welded yet. That ended up being flush the way I fit it up, which I don't really like for the purpose of welding. I might end up grooving that out and sinking a weld in there, but it might not matter because I can weld on the back side. It's a nice thick fillet weld there. But there's that issue. This didn't fit up too nicely, some of these corners and stuff. But that's more my fault. I could have just taken a little bit more time with that, but again, there's enough metal there where I can blend it off and it'll look okay. You see right down in here, it's a little bit of undercut. That's what I was talking about as far as trying to make your welds as nice as you can, because when you go to grind it, you're going to have those imperfections. If I don't buff that out, then it's going to show up in the paint. And then I welded up here. There's kind of a big gap there where I'm not really sure if this part was supposed to butt up against here, because this was kind of a big gap up here. And the more I welded on, it kind of seemed like this was supposed to be moved over a little bit more. But then this would have been flush with this end here, so you couldn't really fit a good weld in there. This ended up being a nice corner joint here, but then there was this gap here. So just a couple things about it. I'm not really entirely sure how this was intended to be put together, but fairly happy with it. It's going to work out just fine. So I got these cleaned up, and already I can see this is going to be a little bit of an issue maybe. I mean, gap top to bottom's not that bad, but you can see over here it's a little bit much. But even if I have this part flush with that right there, still quite a bit of a gap in there, maybe an 1/8 inch gap or so, which might not be the worst thing, but it's going to be a little bit challenging. Got these tacked in. Use 6011, about 85 amps. Got those pretty square. This one too. Measured it also, just to make sure they're even. It's right at about 3 inches. And there too, sorry, can't really see that. But it's looking good, definitely. 6010 is the way to go if you have any of these gaps. Or if you just really need to dig in. You know, we've all heard the term whip and pause, but I actually heard in school they said another term for it was dig and fill, which I kind of like because it really describes what you're doing when you're really trying to get good penetration. You're digging that metal up, and then when you come back on the pause is when you fill that crater back in. Dig and fill, kind of like that. Got a first pass of 6011 on this one over here. Didn't film it because I was just trying to get a feel for it, but when you really dig in, see this, you can hear it make kind of a loud crackling noise. You can hear it ripping through the back, where I did end up beveling that a little bit. That might just be me taking myself a little too seriously, but you see it bit right through there, and that's what you want. So that right there is what you hear guys call the keyhole. That's where your weld here is actually, where am I there? Burning through the 3/16 there, and it's going through to the other side, so you're pretty much getting complete penetration. So I'm going to keep doing that, and then I'm probably going to grind this past a little bit slick, just because there's some pretty rough ripples with 6011. Going fairly well though. I didn't finish up this side because it was just slightly out of square, so I came over to this side to to kind of bring that over to square a little bit. Instead of beating on it, you can kind of bring it that way by sequencing your welds. Alright, so I didn't finish it the same day. Oh well. Well, what I've been doing today is I did that first pass at the 6011, and I just went and ground a lot of this a little bit flush to kind of see how the penetration was, see how the welds turned out, and there's a few little imperfections in there. But I wanted to grind out a lot of those rough ripples because you can trap a lot of slag that way and you're just not really sure what's underneath. That's maybe a little suspect. I'll touch that up a little before I grind it, and then that's going to need another pass in there. But that's definitely a good way to go with the 6011. You want to grind it out, and you know, it's back to the whole grinder and paint make me the welder I ain't thing. Like, I'm not trying to make fun of anybody, and like in a lot of applications that might be just fine. If you're just working on some little sheet metal thing and it's not really critical, then you do whatever you want. But anything serious, like thicker metal like that, you're going to want to do a good job welding. And conceivably I could use a shitty 115 volt flux core and bubblegum enough weld in there and grind it, and then tack it up and grind it flush again and tack and grind, and then eventually get it to look like a good weld, but it won't be a good weld. And I don't do that because I know how this sort of stuff goes. You know, you put your bumper on your Jeep, you're driving around, you think you're looking cool, your big shackles on there, like you're actually doing something with it, and you know, most of the time it's not a problem. But then, you know, a year or two down the road, you end up out in the woods one night, jeeping around with your buddies, about 17 beers deep, get stuck in a big mud hole, and one of you has the bright idea to hook up a chain to one of those lugs and have your buddy wrench you out with his Jeep, and so you hook it up and he really reefs on it because you're getting stuck, and that damn thing tears off, goes flying, cracks the back of his windshield. You know, his girlfriend's sitting back there trying to smoke a cigarette, and then she gets all pissed off and storms off into the woods, and you got to spend the rest of the night looking for her because she's lost and there's no fucking cell reception, and it's just not good. So make the welds proper if it's at all serious. Started going with the 7018. Tried to start off with a 1/8. Too much for the breaker. 125 amps. Not terribly proud of the way this weld looks, but you know, I'm not going to complain very much for having 4 restarts in there. So what I did over here, I went down to 332, which was doing okay, but get a little porosity on the starts. These ones aren't dry, so I might try and bake some of those up. Starting out putting these brackets in. Found out what I have to do on the driver's side is there's these 3 bolts, 2 there and one up there for the steering gearbox. Actually, a couple big old bolts, 16 millimeter. So I got to take those out, which I'm a little sketched out about because those really got to be torqued properly, but that's the only way it's gonna get in there. Guess these bolts were 5/8 actually. They had Loctite on them, so I got them out and I'm just running a die over them to get all that old Loctite out. I mean, these are fairly critical bolts, and it's really good practice to clean all that stuff out. You don't just want to thread it back in. Alright, I got the bumper bolted up on the Jeep. I didn't really get too much footage of it because it was kind of windy and crappy out, and did have some problems with it. I'm going to roll some pictures in to describe a bit of these a little better, but I don't really like the way it fits up and looks on there, and I'm not sure if it's supposed to be that way for the purpose of mounting a winch, but it just sticks out kind of far, probably a good 3 inches or so, and it doesn't line up with the bottom of the fender flares like I was hoping. And there's about, again, a 3-inch gap in between the front of the frame plate on the below the grill on the vehicle and the back of the bumper. So I am planning on modifying that in order to make it sit back nicely so it looks a little better, but that's going to be fairly involved. So if I do that, I might try and make a video about that. But a lot of your fit up issues, I've noticed, will really come out when you actually go to put it up on the bumper. That fit up I mentioned a couple times where I wasn't sure if that plate was supposed to go over a little more where the lugs were. In hindsight, I definitely would butt those up to eliminate the gap, but also to tighten it up a bit, because I don't really like doing this, but I ended up putting some washers in where I actually bolted it to those brackets to hold it on, because there's just a little bit of play, again, about the thickness of the metal. So that tells me that it'd be better to move those closer together before you weld it. And then on the top of that, I would bevel that or grind that back a little bit so you could get the nice corner joint on there to fill it up nice. But didn't really modify it too much. I was just going to put it together how it seemed to want to go together, just to see how it would kind of work out. And if I were to do this again, I would definitely count on modifying some of the pieces a little bit. Again, with no instructions, it's a little bit tough to figure how everything's really intended to fit together, but I would definitely do those things a little differently with the fit up, and probably plan on modifying a bit. And again, I want to modify those brackets on the bumper that actually bolt it to the frame rails, the unibody. I would shorten that a little bit so that the bumper can sit back and line up with those fender flares and against underneath the grill like I wanted, because it sticks out like a little bit more than I would have liked, and I don't think it looks that cool as it is. So there's a little bit more welding to do on the lugs and stuff, and again, I didn't film that or really finish that because I knew I was running into those issues. I just wanted to show what it would look like according to how I put it together in the video, which again, I'll try and make notes in the actual video of when I think I made a mistake and what could be done differently to maybe mitigate some of these problems. But I'm going to call that good for part 2. And again, maybe later on I'll videotape any modifications I make to that. But for the price, I think it's a decent kit. I would just definitely plan on modifying a little bit in order to really suit how you want it to look. And I wish I had gone through with that instead of just kind of having faith in how it was fit up according to the bends, because I mean those could easily be wrong. I think I did some stuff wrong, but you don't really know how it works as far as it was cut out. I mean it could easily have been just wrong, you know, again being that cheap, who knows who's making it and stuff like that. But anyway, that's all for this video. Y'all take care.